So there was a moment in one of my first Morrowind playthroughs where I decided to play as a mage. I wanted to test out the spellcasting and all that stuff, but I also decided to still do the Fighters Guild quests, despite not really being built for those. Um, and so when I got to the quest where you have to kill the 4 or 5 people in the cave outside of, is it Caldera? Um, I realized I couldn't do it because I got in that cave and all of a sudden they just rushed me and I had really no defensive options. And I really liked that. There's a certain mixture of regret and like stubborn commitment. It's one of the most underrated experiences in gaming, in my opinion, because it means that your character is a person. They have individual strengths and weaknesses. They made choices that closed some doors, and in closing those doors, the ones that stayed open, they meant something to that character's story. I want to talk about what happens when games decide that feeling is a problem to be solved. I want to start with something a little concrete because the trajectory here tells the story better than really any argument I could make. So, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind shipped with 27 skills and 8 attributes. You picked a class, or better yet, you made a custom one, chose your major and minor skills, and those choices defined who you were for the rest of the game. You want to be a spell sword? Great, here's what you're good at, here's what you're terrible at. Good luck. The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion trimmed that to 21 skills. We still had the 8 attributes, and we still had classes, but armor types got merged. Medium armor was just gone. And magicka started regenerating on its own, which sounds like a small thing until you realize it fundamentally changed what it meant to be a mage. In Morrowind, managing your magicka was a whole discipline. In Oblivion, it was really just a cooldown now. Then, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim came out. We had 18 skill trees, no more attributes, classes gone, birth signs were replaced with standing stones. You could swap whenever you wanted. The game didn't ask you who you were at the start. It didn't make you settle into a character and go, okay, this time I'm going to play a mage, and that's why every playthrough I end up playing a stealth archer again because it's just the best. Each game cut roughly a quarter of the individual systems. That's not a series of isolated design decisions, that's a game design philosophy. Now, before I go further, I need to make something clear. This didn't start with Skyrim. The conversation around Elder Scrolls streamlining tends to frame it as Morrowind was deep, Skyrim was dumbed down, and that skips the actual inflection point. Oblivion is where the design philosophy changed. It introduced quest markers that told you exactly where to go in a series that previously handed you vague journal entries and expected you to figure it out. It added fast travel from anywhere on the map. It also gave you the auto-regenerating magicka, and it was also the first game that Todd Howard served as executive producer on, and the design goals shifted accordingly. The design was no longer, here's a world, be a person in it, go enjoy it. It was, here's an adventure, enjoy it. Oblivion sits in this weird middle space. It's more complex than Skyrim, sure. It kept spell crafting, it had more skills, but it also established the template that Skyrim would follow. The idea that the player should never feel stuck or lost, never feel like they made the wrong choice. Skyrim just followed that to a logical conclusion. I do want to get a little specific because it's easy to talk about depth as an abstract thing, but I wanted to, illustrate the characters that you can't be anymore. The spear mage, one of my favorite kinds of classes to play. In Morrowind, first of all, you had spears, but also they were their own weapon skill. They had reach. You could build a character around the idea of keeping enemies at a distance while weaving in spells between thrusts. Sure, you did have to switch and put your weapon away to cast spells, but was it optimal? No. It wasn't a good class. But was it my class? Absolutely. Spears were cut entirely in Oblivion. An entire weapon class and all the character concepts built around it, just gone. There was also the spell crafting. Morrowind and Oblivion both had it. You could go to a spellmaker and design custom spells from individual effects. Drain an enemy's strength while fortifying your own. Create a spell that levitates you while turning you invisible, at least in Morrowind before there was a law that outlawed levitating. It was wildly unbalanced. You could break the game just wide open. But that was kind of the point. The system trusted you to be creative, and if you broke things, that was your achievement. Morrowind and Oblivion also had the acrobatics skill. Level it up and you could jump higher, fall further, and eventually leap across rooftops. It was a traversal system that rewarded investment. It made your character move through the world differently than someone else's character. You could approach combat differently because, if you're using a bow and constantly jumping over people, it doesn't matter how close they get to you if you can, jump 20 feet in the air. One thing that I miss a lot also is medium armor. It was a whole armor category that was the right choice for characters who wanted some protection without a huge weight penalty. It gave you a reason to think about what you wore more than just equipping whatever had the highest number. It was merged into the light, heavy, binary in Oblivion. And I wanted to get specific because I wanted to point out that each of these isn't just a stat line that was removed. It's a type of character that you can't be anymore. Every skill that gets cut doesn't just simplify the spreadsheet, it narrows the range of stories players can tell. Of course, I have to be honest about the other side of this argument as well, because if I don't say this, I'm not giving the full picture of this discussion. Skyrim is one of the best-selling games of all time. I think that I've probably bought Skyrim at least 7 times. It brought an entire generation of players into RPGs who had really never touched one before. Even, we can get into the semantics of whether or not Skyrim's an RPG some other time. But a huge part of why it was so successful and so many people enjoyed it is because of the streamlining that I've been knocking this whole time. Morrowind's complexity is beautiful, but it's also a wall. I love it, but even I can admit that the first few hours of the game are pretty tough if you don't know what you're doing. You can build a character that literally cannot hit anything because your weapon skill is too low. You can wander the wrong direction and get obliterated by something that you had no business fighting. The game doesn't care about you. The world just exists, and for a lot of people, that's not very intriguing. It's just frustrating. Skyrim came to the table and said, what if we just let people play? And millions of people who would have bounced off Morrowind in the first hour got to experience the joy of exploring a massive fantasy world. They got to experience fighting a dragon on a mountainside or stumbling into a story they had never expected. That's not nothing. That's genuinely valuable. So I'm not here to tell you that Skyrim is a bad game. It's not. I love Skyrim. And I'm not here to tell you that streamlined game design is the enemy of good game design. It isn't. What I am here to say is that there's a difference between removing barriers to entry and removing systems that give a game, or at least a character, its identity. You can make a game welcoming without streamlining it to death. The question isn't really about, complexity versus accessibility. It's whether you can find a version of complexity that invites people in rather than shutting them out. And I think the series stopped asking that question somewhere around 2006, and it just started cutting instead. But the skills are also just the mechanical layer of the games. The thing that really sucks, and the thing that kept me coming back to Morrowind over and over, is how the faction system enforced an identity onto your character. In Morrowind, you could join a great house, but the other houses would have nothing to do with you. You couldn't do their quest lines. If you picked Hlaalu, then Redoran and Telvanni were done with you. Their quest lines, their stories, their rewards, all of that was closed. That's not the game punishing you. That's the game saying, you are this person now, and this person has allegiances. The world cares about who you are. I don't know how many Morrowind runs at this point. I've been playing since like 2001, but I've done so many specifically so that I could experience different quest lines. Each character was, a different life in Vardenfell. It was, a different political position within the game. The game gave you reasons to start over because you couldn't do some of it on every playthrough. Now, think about Skyrim. You can join every guild. You can be Archmage of the College of Winterhold if you only have access to the base fire spell. There's nothing in the game that looks at your character and says, no, it doesn't make sense for you to do both of these, or all of these. And of course, I get why they did it. They didn't want players to feel like they were missing content. If you spend years building quest lines, you want everyone to see them. But the cost is that they feel, at the very least, a little silly, and at the worst, not real. None of these identities belong to your character. If everyone can be the Archmage, then being the Archmage doesn't mean anything. It's not an identity, it's just another thing on a list. And here's where I want to bring up a modern game that I think does it very well. And that's, of course, Baldur's Gate 3. Because that game proved something that I think a lot of developers, Bethesda included, have been wrong about for a long time. The conventional wisdom in AAA game design the past decade has been, don't lock players out of content. Make sure everyone can see everything, remove friction, smooth the path. But Baldur's Gate kind of did the opposite of that. It's a game built on, this path goes this way, this one goes this way, and you can't cross those paths. Entire characters and storylines become permanently inaccessible based on individual choices. And the thing is it makes sense, right? If I'm playing as the Dark Urge and I kill Isabel and then lose the Night Song, I lose Redeemed Shadowheart. I shouldn't be able to save the Night Song and have a Redeemed Shadowheart if I kill Isabel. Cutting down these paths and saying, okay, you made this choice, now live with it, is I think what makes each Baldur's Gate run feel unique, because every character is not only, usually physically different. I have a specific tiefling design that I use pretty much all the time. But they're also, they have different paths through the story. Each one is their own person. Each playthrough is fundamentally different, and that's why I think people obsessively come back to Baldur's Gate, because you really don't know what you might have missed in that last playthrough. Baldur's Gate sold over 20 million copies. It won Game of the Year, and it did all this with complex stat sheets, dice rolls, and systems that let you build a character who was categorically bad at things. Bethesda spent, years trying to streamline these things and protect players from possibly missing out on something, and yet audiences showed up in droves for a game that did that without remorse. Even Bruce Nesmith, the lead designer of Skyrim, has said publicly that Bethesda should take notes on BG3. He's acknowledged that Bethesda games have become less dynamic over time, and that the gaming community has spoken out wanting meaningful choices. He's the guy who led the design on the very game that I'm critiquing for this discussion, and he's pointing at BG3 saying, that's what people want. We should do more stuff like that. And so now we've landed here. Elder Scrolls 6 is in development, I think, maybe. I don't know anymore. Todd Howard has been talking about it recently, but it's kind of here and there. But also the language that he uses is telling. He says the game is returning to a classic Bethesda style after the creative detour of Starfield and Fallout 76. Fallout 76 being more like a, sinkhole that you run into. Now, on the surface, that sounds great. Starfield was widely criticized for feeling shallow and disconnected. I thought it was very boring. So going back to a classic Bethesda sounds like a course correction. But the question is, what does classic mean to Todd Howard? Because his reference points are Skyrim and Oblivion. When he says classic Bethesda, he's talking about the games that already stripped away the depth I've been describing for the past 20 minutes or so. He's not talking about going back to Morrowind's faction exclusivity, or its wide array of skills, or willingness to let you build a bad character. He's talking about going back to the formula that optimized all of that away. I have a feeling that classic Bethesda is the optimized version, at least in his eyes. And Nesmith himself has said he doesn't think Elder Scrolls 6 will return to complex character sheets, even after the success of Baldur's Gate 3. His reasoning is that Skyrim and Baldur's Gate 3 are fundamentally different types of games, and I mean, he's not wrong about that, but the question isn't whether Elder Scrolls should become Baldur's Gate. It obviously shouldn't. The question is whether Elder Scrolls can find its way back to being a complex RPG. Because there was a time when Elder Scrolls was one of those deep system-heavy RPGs, like an actual role-playing game where you pick a role and you play it. But somewhere along the way, the series decided that things that made it an RPG were obstacles to be removed rather than features to be refined. I feel like I keep coming back to this point that optimization isn't neutral, right? Every time you smooth something away, you're making a decision about what matters and what doesn't. And sometimes the things that get smoothed away are the things that gave the experience its texture. In that last video about Shadow of the Colossus, I talked about how the silence in the game, the vast emptiness between the colossi, it's not dead space, it's breathing room. It's where you sit with your thoughts, where the game trusts you to bring your own meaning to the experience. The emptiness was the point. Any modern game would look at that and go, no, we need to get rid of that. But it gave Shadow of the Colossus such a unique texture. Morrowind's frictional systems work very much the same way. The clunky systems, the weird skills, the punishing faction locks, those aren't problems the game failed to solve. They're the texture of the experience. They're what makes your playthrough feel unique from anyone else's. The spear-wielding mage who tries to keep enemies at a distance, it's not an optimal build, but it's specific. That was a person within the game. That's the character that you made with all the limitations that implies. When you optimize that away, sand down every edge so nobody ever feels stuck or limited or locked out, you don't get a better RPG. You get a content delivery system. You get a game where everyone can have the same experience. You see the same things and you become the same person. And, you know, maybe that's what Elder Scrolls 6 will be. Maybe the classic Bethesda style means another game where optimization has won, where the systems are clean and the progression is smooth and every door is always open. I hope it isn't. I don't think that we need to go all the way back to, you know, Morrowind style, but something where your choices actually matter and have consequences in the world and the way the story plays out would be cool, you know, even if it's just minor stuff. Some of the best moments in gaming come from closed doors and limitations. It comes from the knowledge that your choices matter because they cost something. I don't want Elder Scrolls 6 to be Morrowind. I want it to understand what Morrowind understood, that an RPG isn't about letting you do everything, it's about letting you be someone within the world. If you're still here, you know, thank you for watching this video and listening to me rant about video games and things that, you know, really don't matter. So, book updates. I finished the first draft, and I've got a few physical copies that I handed out, and I'm going to have people read them and kind of give me their notes and tell me what works, tell me what doesn't work, so that I can go through and give a nice polish, you know, essentially final draft. And then after that, I'll probably be putting it up to be sold, so you can actually, you know, get your hands on one of these. If you want to read the first 2 chapters of the book, they're up on my Patreon. They're free to get to. I'm also doing like different lore drops for things that exist in the world that I didn't have time or a reason to cover. But other than that, if you're still here, thank you for watching. Go ahead and, you know, if you can, like, and if you want to, subscribe. That would be very sweet. And if you've got, you know, 15 more minutes, you can go watch my video about Shadow of the Colossus. But anyway, thank you for watching the video, and hopefully I will see you next time when I rant about some video game topic.